You know, Shoto, I cut into our study session as we sat at a small table in a nearby cafe. We currently were on a small study date, so we could just make sure we had everything we needed to know for our midterms down. But of course, just studying was boring as I remembered most of the material, so I decided to strike up a conversation with Todoroki. He sat there, quietly as his eyes gazed on the page of notes he had in hand, before looking up at me, hearing me speak. I think he would play a great phantom. A great what? He tilted his head in confusion as his eyes narrowed slightly in thought. I laughed a bit and waved my hand a bit as I spoke. A phantom, like the Phantom of the Opera kind of phantom? I explained as he still looked at me confused. But I just shrugged it off, giving him a wave of my hand. I shook my head. Just forget about what I said. He seemed to accept that as he turned back down to his notes, his beautiful eyes wandering over the pages as he seemed to engross in his work. It made me feel a little sad that he wasn't talking that much to me lately. It felt off, as it was almost like he was dodging me. He didn't talk much to anyone, didn't make much eye contact, didn't seem to pay much attention to anyone, and overall looked to be avoiding me. It hurt me quite a bit as I liked being by his side, but now I just felt uncomfortable being by his side. Just as I sat there thinking in my thoughts, I took a notice of the door's ding. It wasn't something I would usually hear, as I tend to block noises and such out as I study, but now, since I'm not as focused in as I thought, I paid attention more to the world around me. Letting my eyes follow over the noise, I noted the trio of boys walking in with smirks dancing on their faces. They were rather loud as they laughed out, and the other tried to talk over his laughter. I gave them a glare before turning back to my set of notes, sorry. I tried to focus myself on just studying again, but my tries? But my tries were invalid, as I could hear in the background the loud voices. I cringed at it and let out a sigh, frustrated that I didn't focus any more on the paper. Just as I looked up to Todoroki, about to ask him if we could leave, I heard the laughter, the loud noises come closer. I tensed up a bit as I heard a voice call out, "Ooh, what you doing there?" I heard them coo, causing me to glance behind me to see them staring at me, rolling my eyes at them as another one perked up. "Look, fellas, the girl's man ain't even giving her attention," he chimed in, as the middle guy, who looked to be the leader, leaned forward towards me, getting rather uncomfortably close. "How about you ditch half and half and come back to my place? I'll give you all the attention you need." He seemed to give me a growl, which signaled a look of disgust onto my face. Just before I could push him off, though, a voice from behind me perked up. "Leave her alone." Turning around, I saw Todoroki's face up from his notes, now glaring at the group in front of me. I smiled a bit as he stepped in, but frowned as I turned back to the group. The leader guy seemed a bit shocked to get a response as he looked up to Todoroki, his hands resting in his pockets. "She already seems to be lonely enough with you, so why should I?" Before Shoto could come back with anything, one of the side goons stepped up a bit. His eyes were traced on Shoto as he raised an eyebrow. "Say, you aren't Endeavor's son, are you? Man, I watched your ass get handled to you at the sports festival." I glanced over my shoulder to Shoto, seeing his face go into a solid face of sadness. I knew he was disappointed with the outcome, and I knew his father scolded him a bit for the tournament, so hearing this guy insult him about it seemed to push me a little as well. As I turned around and stood from my chair, the boys seemed to smirk at me, the leader holding out a hand for me. See, I knew you'd come. My hand came out as fast as I could get it, instantly making contact with the guy's face, leaving him in shock. He stunned a bit, his hands springing up to coddle his now red cheek. His eyes looked at me with anger, but that soon went away as I opened my mouth. Now you listen here, you son of a bitch. You can insult and torment my ass all you want, but if you ever think of insulting my best friend right here, I will beat you so hard that your own mother won't even be able to recognize your face. I took a step closer to him, my voice lowering in volume a bit to sound intimidating. And if you even think about running off and telling anybody about this, well then, let's just say I know people in places you couldn't even imagine would love to have you as a shoelace. Got it? The leader didn't seem to be so much scared at the side goons were, as he just looked at me with a glare. The two trembled, jumping a bit when the leader turned around to look at them. Come on, you idiots. This one's no fun anyways. As they walked away, I could hear the side duo whispering a bit about me, saying things like, she's crazy, and such. I just smirked a bit, my eyes looking around the place as I noticed a few eyes were locked onto me. Feeling embarrassed suddenly from the multiple eyes staring at me, I quickly sat back down in my chair, with my face growing red. Looking up a little, I could see Todoroki giving me a small smile. Thank you, he simply said, making you go a shade redder. I gave him a nod, my hands reaching down to stuff my notes away. My eyes darted around, seeing that there were still a few sets of eyes on me, causing me to feel uncomfortable. No problem. Could we get out of here now? He gave me a short nod, his hands starting to pack his stuff away as well. As we got all of our stuff out away and tucked into our bags, he seemed to dart out of the cafe. Finally reaching the streets, we began to watch along the road, ready to go back to our rooms. The first minute of the walk were in silence, but I found that awkward, so I struck up a conversation. I thought you did really well at the sports festival, by the way. I turned to look over at Shoto, seeing his face dusted with a pink color. I found that he was probably just cold from the weather shifting and changing as it was, so I didn't think much of it. He turned to gaze over at me, his small smile still there. Thanks. I thought you did well as well. P.S. You were policed by Togiyami in the festival, just for the sake of this. I just shrugged at him. Okay, Bakugo. Totally kicked my ass when it came time to face him. Todoroki looked at me rather coldly with that comment, caused me to panic a bit as he spoke up. Maybe so, but you put up a fight. Your quirk just became frantic when he hit you the first time. It was I melted a bit into the floor with that comeback, my mind drifting back to the sports festival. I didn't do awful, but Todoroki was right. My quirk did get a bit out of hand at the end there. Oh, shoot. Hold up. I gotta find where I was because my thing just went out of control. Okay, there we go. As I was fighting Bakugo, he managed to get land a bit on me and almost sent me out of the area. But I used the teleport part of my quirk to stay in. As a result from his hit, I was injured a bit, so my quirk was growing frantic. I started to panic as it tried to cover the burn marks on my arm, which distracted me a bit and took away from my hits. I teleported behind Bakugo and got a hit, but in the process of doing so, angered him greatly. He began to frantically with me. Yeah, what? I think it's supposed to be frantically hit. Okay, but anyway. That when I landed one more hit on him, almost getting him out of the circle, he shot an explosion my way and sent me going across the entire field. I ended up going out of the arena with second-degree burns on my arms and legs and had multiple fractures due to the impact. You still did better than me, though, so that's right, that's that. I laughed out of the words, trying to ease the tension in the air. He seemed to laugh a little bit at me, his cold face going back into a tiny smile as we continued to walk. He passed by a few people as we walked along the sidewalk, little bits of our conversation being heard along with the passing of cars. It went back to being quiet between us as I could see the view of UA come into the line of sight. I felt a pang of sadness come over me, as I wished I could spend more time with Todoroki, but that seemed to change as I heard a voice next to me. Len. I turned over to look over to Shoto, seeing him pointing towards a vineyard stand in the corner of the street. Do you want to get some ice cream? I nodded at him, giving him a smile as we walked over to the stand, looking over to the limited menu that had. I came to decide ordering my stuff after Todoroki. Can I please get a favorite ice cream flavor? Yeah. I more stated than asked. The guy working the stand gave me a nod as he began to get me a cone of the deliciousness. Just as he told the price, I went to reach into my pocket for some money, only to have the boy next to me hold out the correct amount of money. I'll pay for hers, Shoto said, causing me to smile as the vendor handed me the ice cream and took the money. Such a gentleman, he said. You two have a nice evening. Nodding to him, I gave a small wave. You too. Turning around, Shoto and I began to walk back down the street. I turned and looked over to him, my smile still present. You didn't have to pay for my stuff, you know, I stated, seeing him turn to me with a mouth full of ice cream. Unlike me, he got a bowl, so he was using a spoon, which stuck out as he turned to me, making the spoon out of his mouth. He swallowed the ice cream before speaking. Of course I did. I do like you after all. My body seemed to freeze in place for a second, causing him to stop and turn around, seeing my pink tinted face. I looked up surprised as I held my ice cream down. You like me? He probably didn't realize what he said as he looked a little surprised himself, his face growing with a blush. Now that he said it, it does make sense. He would avoid me whenever I was talking to someone else because he was jealous. He would dodge me sometimes because his face would go red. He wouldn't make eye contact because he would continue to stare at my eyes. He smiled at me whenever I did the smallest things and would blush whenever I did something cute. He's been avoiding me because he didn't want to confess, but here he is. He tried to justify his words, but I just reached out my hands and hugged him. I like you too, Shoto. He seemed to relax in my arms, his arms wrapping around me gently as he held me close. Just as he pulled away from the hug, I leaned up and quickly gave him a kiss on the cheek, causing him to go redder. I laughed a bit at him, pulling him along to walk. As it was growing later, he seemed to follow as we continued to walk towards the dorms. You're cute when you get red, you know, I asked him. He just seemed to turn his gaze. Thanks. I looked down and allowed my fingers to clasp into his, holding him close to my side. A smile gazed my face as I leaned my head a bit over to his shoulder. You're welcome.